Welcome, Pewter Report readers, viewers, and listeners to a brand new edition of the Pewter Report podcast presented by Briar-Greaves Insurance. Protecting your assets starts with the company you can count on, and Briar-Greaves Insurance can help you with auto, homeowners, flood, boaters, and business insurance. Go to briargreavesinsurance.com for more or give them a call at 813-876-4166. That's 813-876-4166. On today's show, we are going to talk about what is going to happen with Chris Godwin, the star wide receiver. We've already seen some moves before free agency gets going at wide receiver, at edge rusher, and it has made Chris Godwin one of the more lucrative items heading into the offseason. So we're going to start the show with 3 and then get to 2. I'm your host, Matt Matera. Joined with me is Adam Slavon and the face that runs the place at pewterreport.com, Scott Reynolds. Gentlemen, how we doing?
Doing good. This is an interesting show topic because everything is super quiet at One Buccaneer Place about Chris Godwin. I mean, quiet. Like, giving me a little bit of uneasiness about the whole Chris Godwin situation. So let me just kind of start off, gentlemen, and I'll kind of make a statement here to the Pewter people and to you guys and have you guys react to it. So here's a couple of key things to consider. This is the second time that the Buccaneers have been in a contract situation, a contract year with Chris Godwin while he's coming off of an injury. The first injury was a serious knee injury, and that happened when he was 26 years old. 3 years ago. The team still believed in him, still took a chance on him, bet on him, and gave him a fair market value contract, $20 million per year over 3 years. So a 3-year, $60 million deal. And Chris has earned every penny of that, right? He's gotten paid every single cent of that contract. Now he's in a contract year again. As you see there, that happened with the Baltimore Ravens game at the very end on Monday Night Football. Dislocated his ankle. That's a very serious injury as well. Maybe not as involved as all of the ligaments in the knee, but this is still a serious injury. And we'll listen to Jason Licht kind of talk about this and where things stand with him and the team. And this is a video that we'll play here in just a minute from the NFL Scouting Combine. But the thing about this injury is now Chris is 29 and he's getting older. And as we saw the first go around, gentlemen, Chris Godwin did not automatically pop back into being the Chris Godwin of old right away. It took about a season for him to really kind of ramp up and really, you could even say 2 seasons, because Chris was back to being the old Chris Godwin last year in the contract season when he was leading the league in catches and yards. Shoot, he had 5 touchdowns when he got injured. And that was more than he had in any other season over the last couple of seasons. So the one thing to consider about this is, and I know you've got these NFL talking heads out there saying, oh, Tee Higgins got the franchise tag and he all of a sudden now Chris Godwin is at the top of the market in terms of wide receivers. Yeah, in fantasy football or Madden franchise mode, yes, that's the case. But in real life NFL football, you have a 29-year-old receiver with a serious knee injury. And keep in mind, Chris Godwin cannot talk to any other team until Wednesday. That is the official start of free agency. He can't talk to teams during the open negotiating period. His agent can, but Chris can't. Now, the agent can sit there and say, oh, yeah, Chris is fine and he's making rapid progress and he'll be back in the field sooner rather than later. But no team is going to sit there sight unseen and drop anywhere close to $20 million a year for a 29-year-old wide receiver coming off of that injury without their own medical team taking a look at Chris, giving him an X-ray, giving him MRIs, and physically inspecting him. So I don't see any deal out there for Chris Godwin from March 10th through March 12th during that legal tampering, that open negotiating period. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. The only teams that might even be interested in doing that might be the Raiders and might be the Jaguars. Why? Because you had Liam Cohen in the building up until mid-January. You had John Spytek in the building until mid-January before they took their positions respectively in Jacksonville and Las Vegas as the head coach and the general manager. So both those teams do need another wide receiver, but I'm not sure that you're going to have teams beating down the door for an injured Chris Godwin at age 29 without those interested teams as medical staff and their team doctors getting an actual look at Chris Godwin. What are your thoughts, gentlemen?
So what you're saying essentially is there more concern with how the Bucs view Chris Godwin coming back from this injury versus Godwin saying, hey, I appreciate it, Bucs, but I'm going to test the market and see what I'm worth first? Because the part that I can't, and many of us I don't think can understand, is I completely understand the point of like it took him a year to bounce back from the torn ACL injury.
Yeah.
But we're talking about a different injury. The only thing that they have in common is that it's a leg injury or lower body injury if we're talking about hockey. I don't know if it's going to take the recovery time to be the old Chris Godwin if it's shorter or longer with a dislocated ankle than it is a torn ACL. I don't work for the Bucs medical staff, so I don't necessarily know that. My other thing is, and I kind of want to throw this back to you, Scott, is we've been on the show and you're like, Chris Godwin's 100% coming back. I'm putting my stamp of approval on it. What's your percentage rating now?
I still think he's going to come back because I don't know that there's going to be a strong market for Chris. I could be wrong, but it seems to me that the only team that's going to be really interested in Chris Godwin is going to be the Buccaneers up until that particular Wednesday. Now, his agent might have conversations, in theory with other teams. Hey, assuming he's okay, assuming the ankle checks out, are you interested, right? You can have those hypothetical conversations with teams once that legal tampering period opens up. And I'm sure that his agent will do the due diligence. Mike Evans even did the due diligence. He even flirted with the idea of going to Kansas City, playing with Patrick Mahomes. Those were ideas that he scenarios that he walked through in his mind, right, before re-signing with the Buccaneers. I still maintain that Chris Godwin returns to Tampa. What I'm not sure about is when. I don't know that the Buccaneers will necessarily be in a rush to sign him before free agency starts. My guess is this team, because there is a little bit of apprehension about his rehab, my guess and my intuition tells me they may want to see Chris go to free agency and see exactly what he gets before coming in with an offer, because it might actually be a little bit lower than $20 million. It might be 18 million, or Josh Capo, I believe, even says it might be somewhere in the neighborhood of 16 million, possibly. And if that's the case, if you're the Buccaneers, you want Chris back, but you want him back at the best price for you, the team, right? And you've already shown that trust in his rehab. You've already bet on him once before. You did him a favor, right? He's still coming off that serious knee injury. Remember, Chris Godwin, in that year where he re-signed with the Buccaneers, he did not even practice until the very end of training camp. Didn't play in any of the preseason games, and really had about 2 weeks before the start of the season to get going, right? Like there was even some uncertainty whether he would play in that season opener that year. So,
and then he got hurt early on.
Yeah, then he got hurt. Exactly, right. Hurt his hamstring, I believe. So, we'll see what the Buccaneers' appetite is for a robust contract for Chris Godwin, considering they've already done this once when he was younger. Now he's 29, and I almost feel like the team is saying, Chris, we helped you before, you help us now. We want you back. You want to stay here, but let's kind of come down a little bit on the price tag. I could be wrong because I haven't heard anything official or off the record or whatever, but this is just the sense I'm getting. Jason Licht, I want everybody to listen to the tone and the apprehension with what Jason Licht was talking about, Chris. He talked about it twice, about the Chris Godwin contract situation twice. Once at the podium at the NFL Scouting Combine, and then once in kind of the media huddle with the local beat writers after the podium. So let's play this video, Matt. And I want people to listen to what he says, look at the facial expressions, and listen to the tone with what Jason Licht is speaking.
Here's Jason Licht at the NFL Combine.
I wouldn't say change at all. The facts are he had a serious injury, missed a lot of time. There's still some uncertainty that with any injury like that at this point. So move the void so it gives us more options, more flexibility as it pertains to him. And, we just got to make a good decision, but we hopefully can come to an agreement with him because Chris means the world to this organization, to all of us individually, but as an organization as a whole. Nobody has been more resilient than him. We've been down this road before, a similar path with him. So nobody's been more resilient and works harder than him. So those are the good things. And, if I were a bet man, I would bet on Chris. But, still facts are we have to weigh through some variables here. There's still some uncertainties, but he's progressing. He's doing, Chris, he's doing everything he can. And like I said up there, I wouldn't bet against him. He's, we still have some time. We still have some time here. We're going to use as much time as we have to consider options and consider, with regards to him, how we construct things or how we do things. So, that's where we're at right now. We're still kind of in the evaluation stage.
How we construct things, right? That's the contract he's talking about, right? I don't think this is going to be a long-term deal. I'd be surprised if it was a 3-year deal. This might be a 2-year deal, right? Because a 2-year deal, Chris Godwin just turned 29. Adam, when you look at what they did with Mike Evans as he started to get to the age of 30, it was a 2-year deal. Wasn't it a long-term deal? A 2-year deal puts Chris Godwin, if he plays both of those years in Tampa, at 31 the next time he is in a contract year. What are your thoughts? You were there with Matt and I and Bailey at the Combine. What are your thoughts on Jason Licht and how he seemed answering those questions about Chris Godwin?
Yeah, the one thing that stood out with Jason Licht's comments is we have to wade through some variables when it comes to Chris Godwin. And it doesn't sound like he's really going to be gung-ho first day of free agency that he's going to try to lock up Chris Godwin. I mean, you mentioned his market isn't going to be as robust. And with that, I kind of want to mention other wide receivers that are going to be on the market along with Chris Godwin. You have Stephon Diggs, Christian Kirk just got released, Tyler Lockett, Amari Cooper. I mean, there's a ton of veteran wide receivers that will probably be that are healthy and will be around the same price point. So that'll kind of weaken Godwin's market to just a few teams where the Bucs probably don't have to overbid for his services. And that's also DK Metcalf, Brandon Ayuk, guys that could be traded that are also younger than Chris Godwin. It kind of leaves him in the background. And so I think that's how the organization sees it. And Todd Bowles also mentioned that there's medical things in regards to Chris Godwin. He sounded very similar to Jason Licht too. And behind the scenes, we don't know much of how he's progressed from his ankle injury. And if he's near 100% right now, it kind of makes you wonder how long of a timetable are we talking before Godwin gets that deal?
Yeah, Matt, when you look at what Jason Licht said, to me, it seems like a couple things, right? They definitely want him back, right? There's no doubt about it. They want him back, and I think Chris Godwin wants to come back. If Chris Godwin was 26 right now, given these circumstances, it'd be a little bit of a different story, right? Because maybe he wants to get a huge contract. Well, he's already gotten a big contract. He's already made $60 million. Right. This contract, whether it's in Tampa or another team, is going to be pretty close, right? I mean, even if like I saw in the comments here, if the Patriots, they have all this cap money, if they want to overpay him, at this stage of the game, Chris Godwin's probably going to get, let's just say for simple math, let's say he were to get a $15 million deal for 2 years. That's $30 more million plus the 60 he's made, plus his rookie deal. He's bumping close to $100 million, right? That's generational wealth right there, fellas. So is $15 million in Tampa to stay with a team where you already know the guys that you're playing with, you already know you're a scheme fit in this system. You have a quarterback who loves throwing you the ball. One of your best friends is on the team, and Mike Evans, you are the dynamic duo. Is it worth a couple million more dollars to go to a lesser team like the Patriots that aren't going to sniff the playoffs for a while? Or do you want to sit here and stay in Tampa and work on your legacy and do something that only a handful of players will have a chance to do? Guys like Mike Evans, Lavonte David, Tristan Wirfs, Antoine Winfield Jr., only really a couple of these guys have a chance to get a second Super Bowl ring in Tampa, right? This is a young team. A lot of these guys don't even have one. The Yaya Diabis, the Rashad Whites, they don't have a Super Bowl ring. But there's only a handful of guys that have a chance to get a second Super Bowl ring. You talk about Bucs Ring of Honor. You talk about cementing your legacy. You're not going to catch Mike Evans, but you could certainly go down in Tampa Bay as the second best wide receiver in franchise history. He's already there now. Every yard he catches, every ball that he holds in, every touchdown he scores, he pushes his status up in the Tampa Bay annals. So I don't know. I think if Chris Godwin were to leave in free agency, he would want to go to a winner. He only has a couple of years left on his contract or on his career, Matt.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the good thing is like everybody knows Chris wants to win, and that's always more important to him than anything else. As far as like his legacy and what he wants to leave behind with the Buccaneers, well, really only Chris can kind of answer that, because if he did leave, well, he's already is the second best wide receiver in Bucs history, and I think has an argument for the Bucs Ring of Honor, but we can settle that, for another day. As far as like him kind of helping out the Bucs this time around, I don't know. I think we're kind of looking at this from rose-colored tinted glasses from the Buccaneers. Like, sure, yeah, come on, Chris, buddy, help us out a little bit. You helped us out a couple of years ago, but at the end of the day, it's a business,
Yeah.
Nobody was bitching and moaning when the Bucs traded Carlton Davis. Nobody was bitching and moaning when they cut Gerald McCoy, who had been with the team for a very long time. Except for Gerald McCoy, and Carlton didn't say anything publicly, but I'm sure he didn't love getting traded at the time, even though the Lions, ended up blowing up. So as far as like Chris doing favors for the Bucs, I don't necessarily think he has to, because if it's a business, it's got to be a business both ways. And the market, to me, the most important names in the market, I hear you with Stephon Diggs, but he tore his ACL this season, and he's older than Chris Godwin. Amari Cooper was already declining before he got traded to the Buffalo Bills and really didn't do that much with Buffalo, even in the playoffs. That was more Khalil Shakir. So the biggest names in free agency, and Adam, to your point, a lot of them are guys that want to be traded. We saw DK Metcalf today request a trade. I think that's big time. That could kind of help the Bucs if they want to bring back Chris Godwin, if everybody's going to be looking towards Metcalf, who only has one more year left on his deal. Ayuk is another big one. And the fact that Davante Adams is now available, it just takes one team, whether it's Davante Adams or whether it's Chris Godwin. It takes one team to be like, okay, we believe you're going to be the player that you have been for all of your career. That's where I worry with the Bucs. Ultimately, I do think that he's going to come back and play in Tampa Bay. But those are three names that I think add into the mix so much more than before. And there's another thing that I think is really important. Scott, you kind of brought this up before about how like Mike Evans had to earn his next contract, and before they've had other players go out and test the market and see what they're really worth. That was big with, I believe, Carlton Davis and Jamel Dean too. Like we all thought Jamel Dean, the last time that his free agency came up, we all thought he was gone. But the Bucs said, all right, go and test your market, see what you're worth. And they actually got him for cheaper than what everybody projected what Jamel Dean was going to be. So I could see that situation really coming about. And if Chris Godwin does end up leaving, God forbid, that changes the Bucs draft plans too. Because either they're all the way in on Jalen McMillan and Jalen McMillan's wide receiver 2, or it's way more likely that Tampa Bay goes with the wide receiver in the first round of the draft.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why they had interviews with guys like Matthew Golden from Texas and Jack Besh from TCU, who might sneak into that bottom part of the first round as well. So you're right. And I think the last thing I'll say on this is again, I still believe Chris Godwin ends up in Tampa Bay. I would be shocked if he is not a Buccaneer. What I don't know and what I don't have a good feeling about because of the injury is when that happens. If he and the Bucs can reach an agreement before the start of free agency. And I'm not even talking about Sunday. I'm talking about Wednesday, right? That's the official start of free agency. That's when players can sign with other teams. Their agents can start negotiating with teams on Monday. So to me, that's That's going to be a little bit of a conundrum right there. Is can they get a deal done before then? Or do the Buccaneers even want to get a deal done? You bring up a good point, Matt, with Jamel Dean coming back for less than what he thought he was going to get. And Jamel Dean was healthy. That's the thing.
Yeah.
This injury is a real X factor because, again, I do not see a team wanting to pay Chris Godwin anywhere close to market value without getting a doctor, hands-on Chris Godwin, looking at that ankle, doing the medical exams themselves, right? Not trusting what an agent says, or an agent could say, hey, here's a copy of the latest X-ray or MRI. No, you're talking about, 50, 60, $90 million contracts, whatever Chris Godwin's going to end up getting over, 2, 3, 4 years, whatever. You're going to want that doctor to do those tests at your team facility. So you are getting the actual facts from the doctor, not what the agent has to say. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens for sure. And I, again, still very hopeful. And I believe that Chris Godwin will come back. Both sides want to come back. It's just for how long and how much, right?
That's going to be the case. It's a little tricky. It's certainly not what it was last offseason when trying to find room for all of these players, but there's no doubt it would be a seismic shift if Chris Godwin does not end up in Tampa Bay. We're not saying that's happening, but there's probably a little bit more of a possibility than there was a couple of days ago.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, does he hit free agency? I think even if he does, there's a chance he comes back, but will he get there? And we'll have to see. One thing I do know, folks, is when it comes to money, I like to save money, and I do that with Briar Greaves Insurance. That's right. It's the insurance company that the late, great Mark Cook told me about years ago, and I became a Briar Greaves customer, and they're back advertising with Pewter Report on our podcast, and we're grateful for that. And I'm grateful to have them as my insurance agent. And while they can do a lot of things for you, homeowners, auto, flood, boat, business insurance, the one thing that they're really stressing right now is automobile insurance. And unlike other agents, Briar Greaves Insurance has access to 90% of the carriers in Florida. Having an agent like Briar Greaves will ensure that you're getting the most competitive premium possible. No more wondering if you're getting the best deal, because you will know what everybody has to offer, including Geico now. That's right. Briar Greaves just became an exclusive Geico agent. Only a handful of agents in Florida can make that claim. Geico has an appetite for younger drivers, high school kids, college-age kids. They're some of the most expensive burdens for a parent's auto insurance costs. I know that full well with 4 kids myself. Briar Greaves will do the legwork for you and compare the rates across all of the auto carriers in Florida. And maybe it's Geico, maybe it's Travelers Insurance, like the company that I'm with. But let Briar Greaves Insurance do the legwork for you, whether it's for your auto, whether it's for your antique car, your RV, your motorhome, and so much more. Give Briar Greaves a call today and get a free comprehensive market summary of auto insurance options for you and your family. Visit Briar Greaves Insurance today. That's Briar, B-R-I-E-R, Greaves, G-R-I-E-V-E-S, or call their office today at 813-876-4166. That's 813-876-4166, and tell them Pewter Report sent you.
All right. Thanks to Scott for joining the show. Myself and Adam will take over the rest of the way as we continue to talk about this topic with Chris Godwin, other Bucs topics as well. Let's get to a couple of comments first. Of course, if you want to super chat us, you will get to cut the line. But in the meantime, we'll start with a Pewter Report YouTube channel member, Keita Villain, who says, kind of sad to see Godwin go if it does happen. I want to reiterate, we are not expecting this. We are not reporting this. We are just saying we have some inclinations. We have some dots that we can connect that makes it more of a possibility that Chris Godwin could be gone from the Buccaneers. Not that he is leaving, but if this scenario plays out where Chris Godwin is no longer a Buc, that would be one of the more, tough hits, punches to the gut, if you will, that the Bucs have seen in some time. Like when a player retires, fine, that happens to every player in the league. Yeah. Eventually, they're not going to play anymore. But for as long as Chris Godwin has played, to see him in a uniform on another team that isn't the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, it changes a lot in this team. I think it would still be a really good offense, but they certainly would have to address a lot of different things come free agency.
Yeah, that's well said. And when it comes to Chris Godwin, I mean, he's beloved by the city of Tampa Bay, and just the role that he played in the 2020 season for the years since. I mean, this would be the biggest loss that I've seen. And like, you can get over like Carlton Davis getting traded or Ellie Marpet retiring early. That's one thing. But to see Chris Godwin, just such a critical part of this offense at its best in team history. We mentioned before that he was the second best wide receiver in team history. It would just hurt seeing him in that silver and black in Las Vegas, or if he stays in Florida but goes to Jacksonville with Liam Cohen. I mean, it would just hurt Bucs fans.
Oh, that would be really rough. And in terms of like, if you were to rank it right now, we're not going to go in any particular order, but Mike leaving would be catastrophic. Like after next season, if he becomes a free agent, Winfield and Wirfs, like they're under contract for so long, I can't even like think about it just yet. And Baker's been on another team before, so we've seen that. So it's really Mike and Chris are the guys that have been here for so long and played so well at such a high level where I think it hurts a bit more compared to other guys. Joel M says, I want to see Xavier Restrepo on our team as well. That is the wide receiver out of Miami. The U, we saw him over at the Senior Bowl, did a pretty good job, spoke to him a little bit at the NFL Combine as well. He's got a good skill set, but I don't know how much more he is other than a slot receiver. Like, would he be a good addition to the team? Hell yeah, absolutely. But I don't know if you draft him and just go up, like he's your number 2 receiver for the Buccaneers. He seems like more of a compliment to all the other, top guys you have on the team.
Yeah, he has a unique size profile. Like he's 5'9", but 205 pounds. I don't think a wide receiver in the NFL is built like that, but he's like a stocky slot guy. And while he could create separation, the only way you could really see him in Tampa Bay is if Jalen McMillan's a wide receiver 2, and they're just firm on Restrepo being the wide receiver 3. But he did have an impressive Senior Bowl.
Wasp says Patriots are going to overpay for Chris Godwin. Those are one of the top teams that I'm worried about, and Scott makes a ton of sense with the Raiders and the Jaguars as well, although the Raiders just did give a ton of money to Max Crosby, so I'm not exactly sure what their salary cap situation is now after that big-time move. But I know the Patriots have a lot of cap room. They certainly have a need at wide receiver. What's going to be interesting is, because they also have one of the top draft picks. I believe they have the 3rd or 4th overall, if I'm not mistaken. And it'll be interesting because they still have a pretty good defense despite being a bad football team. And as much as it pains me to say, Drake May looked not bad as a rookie quarterback. He certainly wasn't Jaden Daniels. He certainly wasn't Bo Nix. But in terms of like the pieces he had around him compared to what the other guys had, I thought it was an okay rookie year. Now, if you throw in Chris Godwin in the mix and you set up that offensive line, and there's talks that the Patriots want A.J. Brown as well, then that becomes way more lucrative for Chris Godwin. So I do worry that one team will overpay. I don't necessarily think it's the Patriots, but we see every year teams make silly decisions. They overpay for guys because they're desperate for, a certain position. And, it's a new regime with the Patriots, with Belichick gone. This will be the second year now without Bill Belichick, so a new front office. Anything could potentially happen with this situation.
Yeah, the Patriots are a sneaky team here, Matt. And you kind of look at parallels to what the Bears did last year. So they drafted a wide receiver high, but they also traded for Keenan Allen, and they got that veteran wide receiver for Caleb Williams. A team like the Patriots or a team like the Raiders, if they draft Shador, you have a wide receiver like Chris Godwin there. He's the immediate wide receiver number 1, and he would just be the security blanket and just such a great guy for the culture, for the locker room. I mean, we've seen it covering the team, and you wonder if that would be appealing for one of those teams that has just like $100 million in cap space. I mean, they have to spend it on someone. Maybe they overpay a little bit for Chris Godwin. If it comes down to, if Godwin gets offered like $22 million a year from New England compared to 16 from Tampa Bay, he might take that 22 from that other team, even if they're a little bit worse. You kind of wonder.
Yeah, I don't know how much of a hometown discount Godwin is necessarily going to give. I know we all want him to, but that's the decision for him to make. I'm sure, like, if all things were even, and let's just say New England, Vegas, and Tampa Bay were all giving him the same amount of money per year, he probably stays with the Bucs. But we're not talking about that, which is why it's important to kind of differentiate the concerns with Godwin. Is it more Tampa Bay concerned with how his rehab is coming along, or is it Chris Godwin being like, through back channels of, I will go and test the market and then decide on what I want to do? And this plays well into what Kieran Butt has to say with, my prediction is that his agent will go out on Monday, talk to teams, and see how much they're willing to pay him if the ankle is okay. Then go back to us with the numbers for a deal. I ultimately think that is going to be the play as well, is because there is a good enough relationship, a great relationship really, with Jason Licht and Chris Godwin and the whole front office, really, that because of their history together, I think both sides deserve the right to, no matter what decision is made, the Bucs and Chris Godwin have to be the last conversation that Chris Godwin has. And if the Bucs want to match it, I think they should have every right to, and that's where you get the benefit of, working with someone that you have for your entire career.
Yeah, and while you mentioned, you wonder, if Chris will give the Bucs a hometown discount, he will give them the last chance to match any offer that he gets from another team before he decides to leave. So I would think that would also be the play. But Matt, I want to ask you more about the Raiders. So the Raiders, they gave Max Crosby a new deal today, but they also gave Alex Kappa a 2-year deal, a former Buck that John Spytek is familiar with. Spytek was part of the front office when they drafted Godwin back in 2017. The wide receiver 1 right now is Trey Tucker. You wonder, are they the first or second option for Chris Godwin? How appealing would that be to go to Las Vegas in a big market, new stadium, a stable organization led by Spytek and Pete Carroll? I mean, that has to make some sense too.
It absolutely does, especially with Tom Brady being heavily involved now, and he was teammates with Chris Godwin, won a Super Bowl with them, and helped him have one of the best years of his career in 2021 up until, statistically, obviously, can't really be the best year if you tore your ACL, but statistically, one of his best years up until that injury. It's very much a concern when you talk about the lack of talent that the Raiders have on offense. I mean, they don't even know who's going to be the quarterback right now. And outside of Brock Bowers, you don't have anything going on in the passing game. So that's where Chris Godwin has to find his own fine line as well. How much money is worth playing with a overall bad offense? Now, clearly, the Raiders are going to try and revamp that entire offense. What do they do with their first-round pick? Do they go with the quarterback? Does Chris Godwin want to play with Shedeur Sanders if that ends up being the case? Or, do you end up going... What if Sam Darnold goes to the Raiders?
Ooh,
what happens in that
Ashton
situation? Does Chris Godwin, and that changes it. Does Chris Godwin want to go and play with Sam Darnold as his quarterback, Brock Bowers as the top receiving option? And if they go after Ashton Genty, they still have to figure out the offensive line, but you still have some pieces there compared to going in with absolutely nothing to begin with.
Yeah, and that could very much be the case where Godwin sees that as a fresh start. I mean, in Tampa Bay, he's had his best seasons in Tampa Bay, but he's also had really catastrophic injuries too. So you wonder if he kind of wants to turn the page. I mean, if he went to a team like Las Vegas or New England, you also have to account for he'd get a lot more targets. He wouldn't have to worry about sharing the ball with Mike, and his numbers would probably go up too.
And that division is so odd with the AFC West. It's like, the Chiefs obviously are the cream of the crop. 3 straight Super Bowls. They won their last 2. But they have some offensive line issues. They don't have the skill set at receiver that they did a couple of years ago. Travis Kelce's coming back for one more season, and he's still not obviously in his prime. The Chargers, you feel like they're in a good spot with Harbaugh and Justin Herbert. But, they're kind of retooling their defense completely. They don't necessarily have a stud on offense besides, I don't know if Vlad McConkey's a stud, but he's certainly a quality wide receiver. So, I don't even know what the AFC West looks like going into next year outside of Kansas City being the favorite for sure, and Denver being on the up and up, and Sean Payton getting this team better and better. You got to look at the competition overall, too. Mark Fisher with the $4.99 super chat. Thank you very much. Says, I hear two messages. One, it will be awesome if we get the great Chris Godwin back. Two, teams are worried about how healthy he will be, and we don't know either. That's very true. Only the Bucs can have the best idea right now of what Chris Godwin looks like in terms of his rehab and getting better and stronger, because he's been working out in the Bucs facility, but the season's almost up, and then he's not going to be able to. So, and that's what goes back to my original point is I don't know what the recovery is like for a dislocated ankle versus a torn ACL. I've heard other people say that this type of recovery is much better and much quicker than a torn ACL. Well, if that's the case and you're expecting the same Chris Godwin to return, the Bucs should be jumping at the opportunity to re-sign him to a 3-year deal or whatever the case may be. But we don't necessarily have the answer, and I don't know if the Bucs are trying to be coy about it by any means, but it plays a huge, huge role into what this offseason is going to look like.
And Matt, for an organization that takes care of its players, I mean, re-signs all of them. You look at last year, re-signed Winfield, Wirfs, Mayfield, Evans, all those guys. It would be telling if first the organization didn't re-sign him before free agency, because they still have the chance to. That's why they pushed back his void date to the last day of the league year, March 12th. If he hits the market and he doesn't sign in the first couple of days, that's another sign of like just how serious this injury is. And if the Bucs do that, it's kind of a game of chicken where like they let him go and, hey, go talk to Las Vegas, go talk to Jacksonville, see what they have to offer and come back to us. And if he doesn't get good offers from either of those teams, they could just keep lowering the price and they might get a deal on him in the end.
Right. And that's the Jamel Dean theory, because that exact thing happened with Jamel Dean a couple of seasons ago. And now, ironically, Jamel Dean may be out of town. We'll see what happens with that. Felix Schmidt says, if Godwin signs elsewhere, actually, I want to get to one more before that. We will get to your comment, Felix. Matthew Sam says, Tampa will make the cap room to sign Godwin. I want to reiterate this because I've seen other people talking about the Buccaneers, both locally and nationally, that have been like, oh, the Bucs have to decide between Chris Godwin or a veteran edge rusher. And I just want to reiterate, the Bucs have the capability to do both. And maybe it's not an edge rusher, maybe it's a linebacker or the top cornerback available, whatever the case may be. The Bucs are in a better situation this offseason to re-sign Chris Godwin and sign another top-notch, top-level defensive free agent, whether that's edge rusher, whether that's corner, whatever position you want to choose, that's totally fine. It's not a one or the other type of situation. So I know other people have been mentioning that and talking about that. It is not the case. The Bucs have all of the resources to both sign Chris Godwin and get another top free agent out there. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to throw and waste all of this money at a player that they don't believe in, but it's not a heads or tails type of situation. It's not a 50-50 shot. It is very possible to get each of these deals done.
And Matt, to your point, I thought it was absolutely silly that there was an ESPN analyst out there that said that the Bucs had to cut Rachaad White to save cap room, where it would save like $2 million, when if the Bucs restructure Tristan Wirfs and Baker Mayfield to get like $34 million in cap room, they're already in a healthy cap spot. And then you look at re-signing Chris Godwin, getting an edge rusher, maybe they pay a guy $20 million a year. They would still have enough room for that and another move. If they wanted to get maybe a corner or a safety for like $10 million a year, they are in a better cap spot, thanks to the work of Mike Greenberg, than a lot of teams really are out there.
Yeah, they can make a couple of moves. Now, it's not going to be 4 big-time signings worth $20 million per year, but they can make like 6 or 7 new signings, some big, some on the smaller side, some in the middle. But they can do that this season. One thing for context I think is important, the ESPN article about cutting Rachaad White the article was like bold predictions, bold statements that, could happen. So the premise of the article is to kind of be a little more outlandish than usual. But I'm in full agreement. I mean, I've seen other people as well be like, trade Rachaad White. Well, what are you going to get back for Rachaad White that's more than just a 1-year deal? Because if that's the case,
a contract year,
then you're losing out on your best pass blocking running back. Now I want to get to Felix Schmidt's comment, who says, if Godwin signs elsewhere, when should the Bucs address wide receiver in the draft? Honestly, Adam, curious for your thoughts on this, but if there's a guy that they like in the first round, it could very well be their first round pick.
I think if the other McMillan was there at number 19,
that
would be the guy. Like, get that 6'5" wide receiver. You had the Vincent Jackson and Mike Evans like passing the torch. Evans could do the same thing with a guy like McMillan. If he's not there, you kind of wonder about Matthew Golden. I really liked him. He had a really nice combine running a 4.3.
Yes.
But I think the sweet spot, if the top guys are gone, is a second to third round. In the second round, you can get a guy like Jaden Higgins, potentially, another tall wide receiver, or his teammate, Jalen Knoll, in the third round. I think it's a deep enough wide receiver class where you don't need to reach for somebody just because Chris Godwin leaves. But day 1, day 2, it should be a priority, along with the defense, though, too.
Yeah, they have to take care of defense, no doubt about it. Free agency will help with that. If they are able to get Khalil Mack or trade for Trey Hendrickson, things of that nature, well, then edge rusher, drafting one changes a little bit. Like Khalil Mack, I think you'd still draft an edge rusher in the first round if the right guy is available, but it certainly alters how you go about the draft. I think Tez Johnson out of Oregon is another one. Anytime I do a PFF mock draft, he's usually available in the third or fourth round, depending on how it falls. So there are a couple of more options for the Bucs at wide receiver if they don't want to swing for one in the first round. We have this comment by 10x1k, who says 10 by 1k. I just read that the Jags are close to trading for Cooper Kupp, which makes sense because of the chemistry with Cohen, which would be one less threat after Chris Godwin. We're at the time of the year where there's rumors about everything. I mean, there was a Twitter account, X account called NFL Rumors that said that Hunter Renfrow was retiring.
Yeah, I saw that.
Hunter Renfrow quote tweeted it and was like, damn, like, I was just trying to make my comeback and all of a sudden I'm retiring. So I'm not sure where you saw that. Like, maybe it was a legitimate source, but just keep in mind that there are certain accounts out there that just say stuff for the interactions. Like, there was an account, and it's a pretty well-known account, but I don't need to go public with it. It was Dove Kleiman, who is, all they do, he does, whoever it is spam this, spam that, all that stuff. It was a tweet about, or an X post about CD Lamb, and it was like, CD Lamb has restructured his contract, like, man, the fearlessness to put his team first, and all he wants to do is win, just like, wow. And it always ends with like the eye emoji or something like that.
Yeah.
CD Lamb isn't taking any less money. He's getting the same amount of money. They're just, changing it into a roster bonus or different things, or kicking the can down the road. He's not taking less money. It opens up, I think it was like $20 million in cap space. He's not losing $20 million. He's still getting the money. He's just getting it at different times, and different payments come with it. So just keep an eye out for that stuff. Mike Evans is another great example. For several years, and maybe it'll happen this offseason if he signs an extension. For several years, Mike Evans would restructure his contract. And everybody's like, oh, my God, that's so nice and thoughtful of Mike. And it is a nice move, and Mike is beloved in the community. That's not the point I'm trying to make. Mike wasn't getting any less money by these contract restructurings. So I just want to point that out. You got to watch out for those type of things, because even though it says restructure, it doesn't mean that they're getting any less money because of it. So just keep an eye out for that, everybody.
One thing I wanted to point out with that comment, though, Matt, is the GM of the Jaguars now, he spent 9 seasons with the Rams, James Gladstone. So you wonder if he wants to go with a guy like Cooper Kupp because he's familiar with them. Liam Cohen, he thrives having that kind of wide receiver. But would they trade a third, fourth round pick for Kupp or sign Godwin if he's available on the market? You don't have to give up a pick. The Jaguars have a lot of needs. I would say that's the top 3, the Patriots, the Raiders, and the Jaguars in that order. Because with Liam Cohen, I mean, Godwin was doing incredible things. He was a top 3 wide receiver before his injury. Like, would he want to team up with the guy that put him in so many places to succeed, especially with Christian Kirk now being released too?
Zach Brannigan, a Pewter Report YouTube channel member, thank you very much, says the national media doesn't know anything really when it comes to us. You guys are the premier news outlet for our Buccaneers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zach.
Appreciate that. I try not to rag on the national media too much because they got to cover 32 teams, and a lot of times they're just going for like the biggest storylines. And sometimes it is the Bucs. Obviously, it was with Tom Brady. Baker Mayfield is still a very polarizing guy, but there are other big stories out there, controversial stories as well. And Bucs don't really have a lot of controversy right now. They're just a good football team that continues to win and win their division. Yeah, free agency and Chris Godwin, I don't know if that's controversial because that happens with every single team out there. And, nobody is immune to it. But you mentioned the national media, and that word national certainly makes me think about how the national coverage of Immuni Financial is out there for everybody that lives in the continental United States to use.
At Immuni Financial, we help you live in the now.
Dude,
congratulations. We're so happy for you.
Thank you.
And even though the now may feel very different, you still need to plan for the future.
How's retirement treating you? Oh, just fantastic.
I know I say it all the time, but you really got to come up to Colorado.
Let's do it. All right. Yeah.
We can help you develop that plan to keep you on track, so you can still prepare for tomorrow, today. Immuni Financial. Plan ahead, stay ahead.
That's right. Immuni Financial has proudly been serving clients across the country since 1980. They can help you with a number of different areas, whether it's advisory services, investment banking, annuities, or sales and trading. They can help you set up a college account for your kid if they plan on going to college. And like I mentioned before, they have offices all across the continental United States. Yes, they have it in Tampa. Yes, they have it in Colorado. But, we talked a lot about a lot of different places today. They have it in Nevada. They have it over in Massachusetts, in Wyoming, Vermont, Oklahoma, Texas, Idaho. The list goes on and on and on. So check out Immuni Financial. See how Immuni Financial can help you today with a free consultation. Maybe you're over in Fort Lauderdale as well, where we'll be by the end of this week for the Tampa Bay Bucs cruise. Very excited about that. We do have one more show coming up tomorrow, but it is a Pewter Insider. So it is for Pewter Platinum and Premier members. That'll be taking place at 1:30 tomorrow. Very excited about it. We're going to talk about the Bucs free agency and preview what they might do, how they're going to go about it, some big names that they might go after, maybe some other players, what re-signings will happen. And, of course, the main reason why we're there is to answer questions and comments from you, the Pewter people. All right, before we close out the show, we mentioned him a little bit earlier, but this DK Metcalf situation, Adam, I think plays a big role with the Chris Godwin situation and the Bucs specifically. I don't think the Bucs are going to go after DK Metcalf because we know how they don't like giving up draft picks, especially early draft picks. But I do wonder if many teams that had interest in Chris Godwin will pivot over to DK Metcalf based on the news that came out today.
Yeah, I think a lot of teams will. There's a few teams, though, that are probably more intrigued with DK Metcalf than Chris Godwin. I mean, a team like the Packers, right, where they need a wide receiver one, you wonder if they go for like a DK Metcalf, a true number one. And I think DK's Metcalf will be his market will be more robust. He's 27 years old. You look at him, he just looks like a big physical wide receiver. And I think there will be more teams interested in his services. But at the same time, there's a trade capital argument where teams, they don't want to give up a lot of ammo, and losing maybe a second, third round pick or signing a guy like Chris Godwin, that's an argument you're going to have to weigh. But at this point in their careers, I think DK has more value. But Matt, I want to ask you, if Chris Godwin leaves, right, if he goes to the Patriots or the Raiders, would the Bucs have any interest in a guy like DK?
Yeah, I mean, who wouldn't be interested in DK Metcalf? The question is, how much would they be willing to pay him? Because I believe he has 1 year left on his deal.
Yeah.
So all of this would be contingent on not just trading for him, but also signing him to contract extension as soon as he is in the red and pewter, because that's a gigantic risk to trade for a guy for one season, say we're going all in, and then all of a sudden he hits the free agent market. And unless you want a Super Bowl, if you're trading a first-round pick and like a second-round pick next year for this guy and you don't win it and you don't have him under contract for several seasons, well, then that's the whiff. And that's exactly what Jason Licht was talking about at the Combine when it came to the thought process of making a big trade. This is actually what he had to say about it.
Yeah, it's tough. There's players getting mentioned by name. They're still with teams that, you mentioned that, of course, we all know how great they are. Sure. It's not as easy as just picking up the phone and saying, we'll offer you, whatever it is. The team has to want to trade them, and then you have to do a deal with them, and you have to weigh in how that's going to affect your future, what the age of the player is he going to be on the decline, and are you setting yourself up for a situation where a few years later where you have a huge dead cap number and you've given up multiple high picks. So I'm not saying that we would never do that. It's just a lot of things that you have to take into consideration where you don't have to give up as much, pay as much, but you get quality production. But I'm never going to say that we're not going to make a dynamic trade for a big splash. But I mean, we try to pride ourselves if the right one comes available.
I think what was important in there as well, he certainly talked about like not overpaying for someone and the risk of like going big for one player. It doesn't work out, and then you're stuck losing, all of these draft picks. But just seeing, what the price is and striking with the right opportunity, maybe taking advantage of a team that's trying to get rid of somebody. That's really where the bread and butter is. And the other big thing that Jason Licht, I think, kind of mentioned, it's either finding deals that make more sense for them, like the JPP deal, or the fact that you need a trade partner and someone to agree to this deal as well. And that kind of takes me to Jamel Dean with this current situation of everyone's like, oh, just trade Jamel Dean. Like, that'll get him off the books, and they'll save some money that way. Another team has to want Jamel Dean in order to get this trade going. And I know it worked with Carlton Davis. I'm not saying it's impossible, but what I am saying is you can't just automatically be like, oh, they're going to trade Jamel Dean. Now, if a team wants to give up like a 7th round pick, I still think the Bucs would probably do that, but you need someone else to get this deal done. It's not just like, all right, I'm going to hit the trade button, and now Jamel Dean is no longer a Buc.
Yeah, agree with that. And with Jamel Dean's contract being what it is, he's kind of a negative value at this point too, where like teams, they might not want to give up a pick. The Bucs might just release him, and then a team can sign him on a cheaper deal. But Jason Licht, he also mentioned, I want to point out, that he sees this as an ascending team, one that over the past couple of seasons, they've built a young core, a young roster, and they don't want to risk throwing a day 1 or a day 2 pick on somebody, as you pointed out, just to see them leave a year later. I think they have a larger Super Bowl window that extends beyond just this season. I mean, with the division the way it is, you would expect the Bucs to be winning the NFC South again. But into the future, I mean, they have to weigh the first round and second round picks that they have this year, next year, and the year following, because those are going to be the next core that really gets them to the promised land. And if they think it's for a Trey Hendrickson or another pick your edge rusher out there, if they think that gets it done, that pushes them over the hump, great. But don't expect them to make that kind of move either.
It very much is a big situation to deal with. Scott Jackson says, if Tampa brings Chris back for less than $20 million, I'll be pissed. He has deserved it and has absolutely carried this team for large stretches throughout his career. He's had a huge, gigantic impact for the Buccaneers. There's no question about that. Ultimately, that's up to Chris Godwin if he wants to accept less than $20 million. If he wants to, and we'll see what, obviously some of this dictates the market that is around him. But I don't know. I don't think the Bucs should be faulted either. Again, it's a business on each side. So I don't think you should be mad at the Bucs if they get Chris Godwin for less than $20 million. on a human level, that's still a ton of money, regardless of. But I get it. You should also get paid what you're worth. And Paul Rice says, just finished packing for the cruise.
Awesome.
Love hearing that. I'm almost done packing as well. Yeah, we will be on the Tampa Bay Bucs cruise on Friday. Get back on Monday as well. Very excited for that. A couple stops along the way. That should be fun. And speaking of stops, make sure you stop at a walk-ons near you.
What an amazing comeback, Coach.
You're not kidding. I mean, we did lose the game badly, but coming to walk-ons afterward, the team got a much-needed win off the field.
Walk-ons for the win.
Shout out to walk-ons and earn free mozzarella logs just by downloading the Walk-Ons app. You can earn, save, and win and get Walk-Ons rewards when you do. That includes getting 100 bonus points for trying out the Southern Bourbon Wings, the Southern Bourbon Sauce. That comes with some fries as well. There's tons and tons of great food over at Walk-Ons, from the wings to their main courses. Love the appetizers too. I want to try out the Southern Bourbon Sauce as well. And there are 3 walk-ons in the Tampa Bay area, one over in Lakeland, another in Wesley Chapel, and a third in Midtown over by Raymond James Stadium. So check out walk-ons and have a great time with their food and drinks. All right, that's going to wrap up today's show. Just a reminder for everybody that tomorrow we have a Pewter Insider coming up at 1:30. It is a Bucs free agency preview. We'll chat with Pewter Premier and Platinum members about this topic, answer any questions and comments that you may have as well. In the meantime, if you're not already doing so, please follow us on our social media on X, Facebook, and Instagram at Pewter Report, and our YouTube channel is Pewter Report TV. Please like and subscribe. Leave a comment on this video too. That'll do it for us on today's show. For Adam Slavon, I'm Matt Matera, and for Scott Reynolds as well, I'm Matt Matera saying thanks everybody for watching, and we will see you soon for another edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Out.